Stephen Miller. I am so excited to have you on for real. Thank you for joining me.
Yeah, it's so good to be on here. I've been waiting for this for so long, so I'm
I'm
really
so
excited.
excited. You are presently sitting outside of your home in an RV, and there's a cat behind you. So,
I do, yeah.
and what's the cat's name? Let's just have her
So
be a part
this
of this.
is this is Sable. We've had her for 12 years now. She's an old lady, but she's my old lady
I,
and she loves to be near me. So I'm just
I
totally letting her stick around and hang out in this shot. And she's our special guest for the podcast
I
today.
just, my new goal of my life is for Mark to one day say of me, she's an old lady, but she's my old lady. I'm going to add that in. I'm going to request that
Yes.
or tattoo it. Okay,
I
Stephen,
love
for
it.
those who are listening who have not had the great fortune of running into you before, tell us who you are, with whom you spend your days, and how you spend your days.
Yeah, I'm Stephen Miller, and I have seven amazing kids. I've been married for coming up on 20 years this year, which is pretty exciting.
Yay.
And I spend pretty much all day, every day with my family because for the last 4 years now, we have been doing this like YouTube thing where we tell our family's story on YouTube and kind of just social media in general. And for whatever reason, like God saw fit to like have that take off and be the thing we do. And it's our new ministry. I spent almost 20 years in traditional ministry in the local church as a worship pastor and songwriter and artist and author and all that kind of thing. And then this sort of just took off in we started in 2018. It really took off in 2019. We've been doing it full time ever since, in addition to some other sort of entrepreneurial ventures that I do, just because that's how I'm wired. So it's awesome. Amanda's my wife. We have four adopted kids, two from China, two from Ethiopia. So our kids are 18, 17, 16, 16, 14, 8, and 7. And I say that I sort of hesitated on that because we actually have two kids with birthdays next week.
Oh
And
my
so it'll
gosh.
be 19, 17, 16, 16, 14, 9, and 7. And it's just sort of how it works out. Our kids all have, we have, all of our kids have a birthday set. They're all 5 days apart on
What?
different groups of kids. So
That's
yeah, it's
crazy town.
kind of wow. Yeah.
We have my two eldest are born were born on the same day, 3 years apart. And so
Wow.
poor Mitch had he's the second born, and his elder sister is a little, I mean, vocal. She has a leadership gift. And
Yeah.
so for many years, Mitch had a pink cake because mama was just too tired to make multiples. And so I'm guessing you guys combined celebration because that's a lot. That's a
We sometimes we do. Like if we're going to do something special, a lot of the times what we do instead of a big party or whatever is that we will go have some sort of experience. So
good.
for a while we would do like Great Wolf Lodge or something
Sure.
where we would all go and sort of do it the weekend that falls in between the two birthdays.
Yeah, that's good.
Lately, actually, now that the kids are older and they all have friends, they all kind of want to have their own birthday party with their own birthday cake. We've always kind of done the birthday cake thing,
Yeah.
but most of the time it's not making one.
Yeah.
Usually they'll pick out like an ice cream cake or a cheesecake or something like that that they really prefer to traditional cake, which makes sense because Amanda and I aren't really big on traditional cake anyway. We really prefer the ice cream or cheesecake thing. So
Got it.
it's fun.
That's
It's a win
awesome.
for everybody.
I
Yeah.
love it. I love it that we are starting our conversation here because um, the reason I ask you that question, the reason I ask other guests, with whom are you spending your days and what are your days like? I think there's this idea that when we get behind a mic and people hear us in their earbuds, and thank you for letting us in your earbuds, there might be an idea that we always have our light on and lipstick, not you, Stephen, and just this is all of my day. I spend chatting with interesting people. And really, most of your day, most of my day is, cleaning toilets, taking the dog for a walk, hanging
Yeah.
out with Sybil, making sure everyone has their birthday cake. You, however, do have a camera on frequently. And I am so curious about this. Stephen, you're my first YouTube megastar on this show. And I want to ask you a little bit about that because that's a weird job. Your
Yeah,
grandparents did not know what that, your parents did not grow up. My parents would, I probably
I
still,
didn't know.
right? Totally. Well, it
I
wasn't a
had no
thing.
idea.
It
Yeah, I
wasn't a
had no idea.
thing.
Like we started doing it. We started doing it in 2018, and I like just a lot of people had kind of been saying you should do a reality show or you should have a show or whatever. And
Yeah.
I just kind of had heard a lot of horror stories about that. Like they have control over what story they tell about your family and how they
Right.
edit it
And
and
the
all that kind of thing.
editing.
And
Yes.
yeah, and we've always had this thing. We just really want to honor our kids and respect their space and their privacy and make sure we're not, exploiting them or making it to where one day they look back and say, "Hey, thanks, mom and dad," kind of
Right.
thing.
Got a lot of
And
views on
so,
that one. Yeah.
yeah,
Right.
yeah. So, um, I think that's been a big deal to us all along. But like we started it and we just sort of got going with doing it when, hang on one second. That's I'm getting an Instacart order. Hey, how are you?
Oh.
I'm here. Yeah, you're right at the right place. Sorry, I'm just on a call right now. Okay, thank you.
That's awesome. That's what I'm saying. This is normal life. The Instacart guy is here. Do not let him drive away without dropping what he needs to
Well,
drop.
they've been calling. They've been calling. I'm like, surely they'll figure it out. They'll see me in the windows or something. So,
Behind a microphone, but no.
you should just totally leave this in because
I am
it's real life, I
totally
think.
leaving this
I get over here and I'm like, there is nothing to drink here, and I'm going to be here most of the day doing some work, and I need a rotisserie chicken or something protein wise. So
So
I've
you
got that
instant.
going.
That's
So
awesome.
I Instacart today because I didn't have time to run to the store. I finished my workout this morning and ran
Get
straight here.
over. Oh my gosh.
So it's 2018, and we're sort of milling this over, and we get our son's brain diagnosis. He's got a rare brain disease called moya moya, and he was going to have bilateral brain surgery. So if you're unfamiliar with moya moya, it's a very rare brain disease that essentially shrinks the capillaries and blood vessels in your brain and starves the brain of oxygen, which caused several strokes for him as a baby and led to cerebral palsy diagnosis. It's called left side hemiplegia. And so we got this diagnosis and we're like, shoot, like I'm a pastor. How in the world are we going to pay for this? And we'd had some friends who had done YouTube, but like for me, I kind of thought YouTube was this thing that you just host your videos to put them up on your website, kind of like Vimeo or something like
Mm-hmm.
that. Like, and so I would often upload my music videos on there when I'd write a song and release an album or whatever. But I never really thought it was this like really robust social network with a
Right.
very smart algorithm that connected people. But we thought, hey, maybe we could make a couple $100 a month putting up, because I was making, like $20 a month or something like that off of
Yeah.
music videos. So I was like, well, if we started doing this more regularly with like our family story, maybe it would resonate. So about a year after we brought the kids home from China, we put our first video up and it just went boom, and we kind of thought this would help us pay for the brain surgeries. And it took off in a way that allowed us to kind of go, oh, wow. Like you kind of are always gauging like, where's God at work in your life and in your work, and where do you put your time? As more and more of that seemed to take the forefront and the priority, we really decided to make the switch, which consequently, right before the pandemic hit, I moved full time to working from home with my family. And so we really didn't, I mean, thankfully, we had a real moment to breathe and rest and connect. Obviously, that was just heartbreaking for so many people in so many ways. But for us, it was really a moment to center ourselves into this new mission that God was putting us on. And so in hindsight, it was really his providence to sort of make way for this thing. And that's what we do. And it's really weird.
So weird. I'm so glad to get a little of the behind the scenes with that because one of the things that strikes me about you, and we've had some great conversations in this regard, you are a super creative person. You're a musician,
Mm.
you're a writer. You have a great book out that released earlier this year called The Art of Getting It Wrong. And we'll talk about that in just a second. But you're a chronic creator, right? You really love
Yeah.
creating things. And so it's interesting for me to hear, and I'm sure for our listeners too, that sometimes the project chooses you, right? Sometimes
Yeah.
we plan and have our idea, and oftentimes the best stuff just falls straight into our laps. Have you found that?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I think most of my life, because I'm sort of a serial entrepreneur as well. And so some of that is you just start things. And sometimes it's it's a flash in the pan, and sometimes it takes off, and sometimes you're able to provide for your family with it, and sometimes it's more of a passion project. And there's just all these types of things. And it's just a very interesting thing to see that of all the things, it was maybe like 2 years before we started doing YouTube. I heard Craig Groeschel speaking, and he said it may not be something you create that leaves your legacy, but someone you raise. And I thought, wow, that's really profound because I think for me as a creator and sort of the creative type, it's often very easy to find my identity in how do people receive this stuff that I'm making, you know? And in all reality, I've got these 7 people at home, 8 people if you include my wife, who kind of think I'm pretty great, even when my song is terrible or my book bombs or whatever. Like it's just sort of how it goes, you know? And so it's really cool to have this thing that's sort of who I really am, and in a very real sense, as a dad and as a husband, being the thing that we all kind of get to do together to put a roof over our head, or in this case, an RV and a shell of a home, and
And a cat.
and a cat. You know, so
I
it's
love
really
this.
interesting.
This is so interesting to me because you got to do both. What Craig Groeschel said, that you are actually creating and you're building a family and you're raising, and all of those things are
Yeah,
intertwining. It seems like a sweet spot for you. I have a logistical question, however.
yeah,
You talked about that. I want to circle back to when you said one of your absolute paramount goals is to honor your family while you do this, particularly your kids. I mean, I'm guessing
yeah,
Amanda have some, you probably talk with her on the front end as well about what you're posting. And we're going to come back to
yeah.
Amanda because she's a ninja and I can't wait to talk about her.
She is.
But I want to hear about how logistically, how does this work? Because a lot of us
Mhm.
are on social media and posting things, posting photos. I'm very careful. We have 3 teenagers in our house. And so I'm pretty careful about okaying with them before I put something out there.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
being careful to, as you say, sometimes the funniest stuff at our house, I could never post about it
yeah.
because later they might not love that. And so how do
Right.
you walk that line? Because you are creating a lot of content. And a lot of
Hmm.
folks are in this, even if they're not a YouTuber, we're all kind of in this moment of like, how do we know when we are posting something that might come back later and not be quite as exciting for the person in the post? How do you do that with all your
Right.
kids?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a learning curve to that, and you kind of experience that as you go. I think early on, especially as we chronicled like our son's brain surgery, for example, we probably would do that a lot differently now
Hmm.
than we did back then.
How so?
Well, I just think I don't know that Lincoln will ever uh, quite fully grasp or understand like how difficult that was for us.
Hmm.
But he was going through it. But I think some of that is just looking at how do we frame this as artists with as much dignity as we can give
Hmm.
our children,
Hmm.
you know? And so maybe like not include some of the shots or include some of the more difficult things, if that makes sense. Like
Yeah.
obviously brain surgery is just difficult no matter what.
Right.
There's not a lot of getting around that.
Yeah.
But maybe and the other thing is like we always give our kids the ultimate say on like, hey, this is a filming day. Do you want to be a part of it?
Ah,
And a lot of the times they'll, not a lot of times, sometimes they'll say like, no, I don't feel great today. I don't feel like I look great today or what, those things that we all feel. And we make sure we give them plenty of a heads up so that they can get ready and all those things and feel good about doing what we're doing. They sort of always know what's on the horizon, but ultimately they have the ability and the right to say, nah, I'm not into it today.
okay.
So I think that's a big
Cool.
part of it. And then after the fact, like if they see something and they don't really love it in the vlog and they say, hey, take that out, like we do,
Right.
So I think there's a lot of it to that. The other thing is we just sort of have this set of like standards of what we will and won't show. Like we're not going to show our kids crying. We're not going to show the meltdowns. We're not going to show fights. We're not going to do drama. We're not going to do clickbait. We're not going to exploit our kids. We're not going to do any of that stuff that honestly probably would get us more views and cause our channel to go, because that's just what gets the clicks,
Right.
But in the long run, it's not really engendering trust with the community that we're building. And it's also not consistent with sort of our family's brand of like who we really are either, So typically we'll show the joy-filled, hope-filled, people call it their happy pill. It's not like we're not uh we're not lying, like by any means, but we want to be very selective about how vulnerable we get about like Amanda and me, we can do that all day long,
Right.
like whenever we're going through stuff, we're totally fine with, hey, we're going through it right now, but we don't feel like we should do that with our children. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
So
I know what you mean. Yeah, it's
yeah,
their story. I mean, in a lot of
yeah,
ways,
it
it's their
is.
story to tell. And so even though
It
you're the one
is. Yeah.
behind the camera, I
Mm-hmm.
love it that you are so careful about that and just mindful. I love that one of the phrases you used there about, being mindful of how it is giving them dignity. And
Yeah.
you're in the driver's seat for that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Oftentimes, the folks who are writing books or doing podcasts or creating content, or even folks on their Facebook pages, sometimes I think, oh golly, later you're not going to love that. That's up there,
Yeah.
in 4 years when your child is on social media
Right.
himself, he's not going to love that. So I love
Yeah.
it that you are just leaning into that intentionally, that there is, when you talked about engendering trust, I don't think it's just that you're engendering trust with me as your fan or as the person who's watching you, but also with your kids. I mean, that thing
Yeah.
would go up in a just a bonfire if they were worried that who knows what mom and dad
Right.
post today. Yeah, you're smart.
Right.
I'm telling you,
Yeah.
you're smart. Well done. I am not a YouTube star and have no intention. However, you are doing a great job.
Well,
Listen, Amanda, let's go. You
she's
guys have
amazing.
been married, you said almost 20 years. You got married very
Yeah,
young. You look like you're
we
10.
did.
So I'm just
Thanks.
assuming this is an early thing. I love how you love each other. You are
Mm,
you are full-time in love people
yeah.
on screens. And somehow you do this with people watching and still having it look completely natural and completely
Mm,
organic. I don't think you're putting bows where there are no bows. So I would
right.
love to hear a little bit of your story and how you found each other, but also how you keep each other.
Mm, yeah. So we were high school sweethearts. Met my senior year. She was a sophomore, and I was a office aide during the lunch hour. And one day I needed to go tell a
Glamorous
buddy of mine.
position. Very
Yeah,
glamorous.
it's like ultimate, so much power, And so I go into the lunchroom to tell my friend something, and I'm like, he's sitting with her, and she's wearing this white sweater, and she's got this like blonde, just blonde as blonde could be hair, and
Oh, you
red
remember
lipstick, and I'm
this.
like, woo, baby. So, so I go up to my friend Matt, and I'm like, dude, who is that girl? Like, who's at your table? And I point to her like a true high school kid. I
Like an
point at the
office
girl,
aide.
and yeah, And Matt's like, oh, that's Amanda. She plays keys for me at church. And I was like, what? She plays keys? So I go up and just plop down next to her. And hey, I'm Steven. And she's just like, hey, I'm Amanda. And it was about as awkward as it could be. And so I pursued her as coolly as I could for, months. And finally she caved and went to prom with me for our first date.
Okay.
So I sat down with her right after that and said, hey, listen, I'm going off to college and I don't want to have so dumb, I don't want to have a long distance thing. She thinks I'm sitting down to like ask her to be my girlfriend, and I'm like, hey, and like I get home and I'm like, what have I done? What a dumb butt. Like, what am I thinking? So this is pre cell phones, so like I go and we there was this like Founders Day thing in Dripping Springs where we're from in Texas. Okay. And so I was like, I'm pretty sure she's going to be there. So I steal my mom's car and drive down to the Founders Day thing. And I'm like looking for her like street after street. And I finally see her because you can't miss that, blonde hair. And so I like run up to her and I'm like, I'm a fool. Like, please don't listen to what I said a couple of days ago. Like so I did the smart thing and didn't go to college and stayed home instead and married her. And it was actually a good decision, for us. But yeah, I mean, I think Penny, my second daughter, we adopted her from China when she was 12. A couple weeks ago, she actually came up to me and she said, Dad, I don't want to have a boyfriend if he's not like you with Mom.
Oh,
you've been
sweet.
you and Mom, you're like, and she's kind of broken English still, but she's like, you're like, it's like you just started dating.
Oh,
it's like you love her the way that like boyfriends in high school love. And somewhat I'm kind of like, I'm very like honored, but also like, I hope it's not yuck. But she's like, that's what I want, and it made me think about, there's a line in a movie called Meet Joe Black from back in the day. And Anthony Hopkins is telling his daughter, he's like, I want you to be swept away. I want you to sing with rapture and dance like a dervish. And I'm like, that's what I want for my daughters, And so hopefully the way that I'm loving their mom is, giving them an example of what that looks like. Because, you see a lot of relationships and some of it's personality. I'm a hopeless romantic at heart, but like, I can't comprehend a kind of a cold, emotional love, that, cause I'm just, if I feel it, you're going to know it, and so it's really hot. Like everything that's what I would say. People are like, oh, they're so in love. And like, we're not faking that. Like, I don't really know how to fake that, like I don't think it's possible. Like, so it's just, she's awesome, and I just really like her a lot, so I don't know how else to say it. Like, 20, it was funny the other day. We were going through the house with our contractor finally, and he was talking to the electrician, and he said, yeah, they got 7 kids. They actually just discovered the TV last week.
That's about right.
Pretty good. It took me a second, but it was pretty good. And one of my kids is there. She's like, oh, Dad.
Oh, gross. That's so awesome.
But,
so great. I love it. I just love how you love each other. And you're right. First of all, we would be so grossed out if you were able to fake something like that. And everything that I see or hear from either one of you, there's no artifice there. And I would hope, that it inspires folks, no matter where they are in their relationships, to tap into that. I mean, I still see the high schoolers in you, right? Like the way you talk about her is just so lovely. And I think sometimes maybe we forget about those first moments. But the first
Mhm.
moments are why we have these moments. So I just love
Yeah.
it. I love it. And I
And
love
it's,
it that Penny sees that. That's so great.
yeah, I mean, I would say this too. Like, I think some of it is that, when you've been together as long as we have, be 20, 22 years coming up since we started dating, like they see the worst in you. They get to see the very deepest, darkest, worst
Mm-hmm.
brokenness in you.
Mm-hmm.
And when you are still loved in spite of that and you know it, it just does something. Like that's what grace does to us, like when God sees us at our worst and loves us with his best, and then he gives us the gift of marriage as like a earthly reminder of that. And I think that's uh, something that's so beautiful that I've certainly experienced, because Amanda has seen me at my worst, and then some. But she still chooses me and she
Mm-hmm.
still loves me. And I think that I don't know, it makes the heart like Grinch up, like, whenever he hears Wahoo, whatever the song is on Christmas morning. Like that's sort of how it feels to know that you're loved in spite of your worst failures, and that's been our relationship for sure. So
Well, when you can build on something like that, the what results is just really beautiful. And I think that's
mm,
actually the heartbeat of your book as well. The art of
yeah.
getting it wrong. I mean, I think that you're speaking it in terms of marriage. I think you've seen that, and the beautiful stuff that comes after the worst. But you have such an engaging way of telling stories in this book that draw the reader in over and over to listen. You're going to get to
Mm-hmm.
plan B, right? You're going to fall on your face. Here are some ways that I did. And there's just so much grace to cushion that fall. Just
Yeah.
so well done. I really enjoyed reading your books, even. And
Aw,
I'd love for you to
thank
talk
you.
about how you've also released music since the last time we talked. So I wanted you to talk to me
Yeah.
about that, I mean, I want to talk about the content of the book in just a second, but if you can tell a little bit about how how are you doing these things? Because you're doing video stuff, your family stuff, a book, a new song just came out. It,
Yeah.
how do you keep track of that? And how do you decide which? I mean, we talked a little bit about how sometimes projects fall in your lap, but for example, writing this book, how did you decide, or how do you decide what video to make later this week? How are you doing
Yeah.
that? Does your
So
brain just, are you constantly like making this list of, oh, that might be cool?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, totally. So, I mean, Amanda and I are like, there's not a day that goes by that I don't have some kind of idea I'm bouncing off of Amanda. Like, what if we did this? That kind of goes back to I just have this real entrepreneurial
Right.
spirit, and I
Yeah.
get a lot of joy out of building things.
Mm,
Um, and I get a lot of joy out of creating. And
mhm.
I think right now the measure, Bob Goff actually said it on our podcast a couple weeks ago. He said it's not will it work, but will it last?
Mm,
And I think that's just
good.
such a great measure about what do you focus on,
That's really good.
and so like I think for me, there was a time when I was putting out 2 albums a year,
Mm,
and nothing really. It was a waste of resources. None of it
right.
was really. I loved it. Like I had a lot of fun with it. It was part of the way that I was honestly finding my value and worth in ways that I shouldn't have been.
Mm,
Now, I think some of it is that like oftentimes we put ourselves in these little siloed categories by which we identify ourselves to the outside world. And so maybe I think like, oh, I can't do YouTube because I'm an artist, because I'm a musician, or oh, I can't be an author because I'm a, this or that, or I can't
writer. Hmm.
whatever, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And something that's been really freeing for me is thinking about our founding fathers here in
Mm,
America. Is like those guys weren't professional politicians. I mean, they were like wood workers and roof
right.
makers and pastors and
Inventors and yeah.
usually all of the above. Like usually I'm a pastor and an inventor and also a blacksmith and also I write the Constitution.
Right.
Like
Right.
it's kind of insane. And none of them were like, no, I can't write the Constitution because I'm a blacksmith.
Right.
They were just sort of like, do what you need to do, and
Mm,
whatever God puts in your hands, go with it, you know?
Right.
So I'm actually like bouncing that. I told him, man, I was like, I've got an idea for a book. It's called You Can Do It All, which sounds so controversial because everything we see is
Totally.
like, you can't do it all, you know? But like the idea is like, don't let, your own personal, um, perspective of what, because like, so back in the day, if I'm a worship pastor or a worship leader, worship songwriter, whatever, and I put out a song that's not about Jesus, like Chris Tomlin, for example, writes a song about his wife.
Yeah.
People would be like, what's wrong with this guy? He's a worship leader. He's not supposed to be writing songs about his wife. It's like, well, I mean, is not loving my wife worship? Like it's just a
Come
total.
on. Listen, if we're going to go down this road, you're going to have to retract my eyeballs back from how far they're rolling. Okay. I mean, I've written books in the mainstream market and I was too Pollyanna and didn't have enough raunchy sex in my rom-com. And I've written for the Christians. And I didn't do that right either because it was too salty. There is the audience can be difficult.
Yes. Yeah. So I think when you sort of remove those barriers from your own perspective about who you are, there's a really cool, I mean, he's not for everybody. Maybe he is. I think he has the most followers on Instagram of anybody, but The Rock, there's no limitation. Like he's not really an actor.
Yeah.
He is an actor, but like if you watch him on Instagram, he's an energy drink maker, a workout gear guy, a movie guy, a rapper, Maui, he's owning the XFL now. Like he's not like, oh, I can't own the XFL because I'm actor,
Maui.
Yeah. Right. And I think there's some freedom in that. And I think people see that and they're like, man, that's sort of how I do it, I guess, is that I just got to a point in my life where there's too much to do to care, like if people get it or not. Like if they get it, they get it. If they don't, they don't. And it's just me doing what I feel called to do in that moment and asking the question, will it last? Not will it work? And so with the book, I felt like this is something that I want to write that will last, because something that is extremely human is that you mess up. And whenever I look at my kids and I look at my colleagues, they have the same problem. They mess up. They're fearful. They're afraid of what's going to happen if they mess up. They're afraid of what will happen if people found out that they messed up. They're afraid of, just a million things. And, if there's one thing that fear does is it enslaves us. So really, how do we deconstruct the fear of failure and give people a greater hope than just like getting it right all the time, And I think that that's something that I want my kids to be able to look at and go, yeah, like when they're 45, even, read that and be like, this is something that my dad kind of tried to instill in me early on, and hopefully that helps other people too. So that's where that kind of came from, is like, if our YouTube is sort of the highlights where we kind of tell all the amazing, beautiful, wonderful things that we're doing in life, then maybe this is another space that we can tell how we've kind of gotten it wrong. Me specifically, I don't really share anyone else's stuff in there because it's not my story to tell, but this is my story to tell. And how do I do that in a way that, and in the same way, I just released a song called First Love this week. And thank you very much. I sat on it for 2 years. I wrote it 2 years ago, and I've just been refining it and asking the question, like, do I really throw away the money on this thing? Because you don't make money on music anymore. Well, the question is like, not will it work? Will it last? Is this a song that will help people to return to their first love in Jesus, to kind of take the prodigal son's approach and swallow their pride and say, hey, I'm not worthy. I don't deserve this, but I'm here to serve you. And then feel the embracing love of a gracious father to say, no. Like, here's a robe and a ring. Like, we're having a party, you're home, And I hope that it will help people to kind of take that leap, because I think that's a scary leap too. Like, what if I come back and like God doesn't want me anymore? It's back to that whole like I'm loved in spite of my worst moment. God loves me with his best. And so Yeah, it sort of all fits together. I think that's kind of the theme of my life is like helping people to not be afraid of ruining everything because they're not strong enough to do that. You
Yeah,
know?
right. Oh, it's so beautifully said. And I just want to say to you, friend to friend, that the what you're building is going to last. I mean, I just love it that you're even putting language to that, because a lot of, maybe sometimes you feel like, I mean, I do in my life with my family. I wonder, is anyone going to remember this part? Like this, I really poured
Hmm.
myself out here. I'm not sure if anyone's hearing it or listening to this. And that's probably part of why we write books, because in that long form, one
Hmm.
day they're going to cuddle up with that book on the couch and think, this is what my
Yeah.
dad was thinking. In fact, I saw a photo recently of Lincoln, your son, clutching
Yeah.
his copy of your book. And
It's
that was a
so sweet.
beautiful photo. It's so sweet that he loves his own copy. But man, that idea has legs. That will
Mm,
last well beyond that photo. The idea that you've made something that he can hold.
yeah.
Gosh, what a gift. So I'm sure there were many times when you did not want to go to the RV and put in your writing time, but I'm telling you, well done. I laughed in this book. I cried in this book. Your stories are so fantastic. You are such a natural storyteller.
Mm,
That I know that was work to refine on in the written form, and you did it. So well done.
thank you so
Yeah,
much. I
really
really
well done.
appreciate that.
Listen, I know that Sable is probably deciding that she's almost done with this moment. So I will let you go back to your very busy, beautiful, and full life. But before I do, I have a question that I ask all of our um, guests, and it is a two-parter. The first part is, what is a book that you return to over and over? So a book that you
Mm,
recommend to people. You could have read it in high school or earlier, but there's something about that book that you always think, gosh, this was such a great book. And then the second part of that
mm.
is there a book on your horizon that you're thinking, man, I can't wait to read that? And that also can be an old book. We are fans of the backlist at For Real, because we know that an author spends years and years writing and then has 14 minutes in Barnes and Noble, and then they're on to the next thing. So even if it's something that's been out
Yes.
for a while, but you've thought, man, I've got to get that one in my hands. Okay. Any ideas?
Man.
Old
Yeah.
and new.
So, uh, we, as a family, love the Harry Potter series.
Ah, we do
So,
too.
it's one of those that you can just go back to over and over again. And we
So true.
travel so much that even if we're not reading a hard copy of it, we have it on an Audible,
Oh my gosh,
and
the
we're just listening to
audiobooks
the
of those.
audiobook, and
Oh,
it's
whoever
so
the
good.
reader is, I can't
Like,
remember his name.
uh,
Unbelievable. Love it. The
it's
audiobooks are so
it's
good. And we'll put
amazing.
links
So
to
that
all of
would
this.
be, I think, that, and then we're just now kind of getting back into, we had done The Hobbit, but we had
Oh,
never done the Lord of the Rings series. So now we're doing that because
hold
there's that
on a
whole
minute.
Lord of the Rings series on Amazon now.
Pause. You are reading aloud The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings to your children?
Sometimes, yeah. If not me reading it out loud, they'll read it too. I'll read it,
I am in
but then we'll
awe of
do
that.
audiobook whenever we're on that in the car.
I'm in awe because Tolkien, I mean, he is the master of the run on sentence. You have to
It's
kind of like
so
smarten up, but
good.
it's so good.
But you know what though, that it does help you. I mean, in so many ways, the life with which he writes
Mm,
is just, it's so well thought out.
mm.
And especially as you get into the Elvish language and the
Right.
songs, because he has such an emphasis on the songs, so you can
Right.
have a lot of fun with that. There's a lot, there's a lot to those books.
I
And
hope that
but
at
they're
some
long. They're super, super
they're
long.
so long. They're
So it might
your
take a
stuff.
whole year to read
Yeah.
it. Yeah.
I would like you at some
Um,
point. Here's the content idea for you. I know you're really looking for some. Can you do a little bit of that in a video? I want to see you sing Elvish in one of your YouTube videos. That'd be
you
awesome.
bet. I can figure it out. We'll make it work. I do make up stories like less now than it was a few years ago, but sometimes the kids will still ask.
I
But when
love
I'm
it.
putting specifically the boys to bed, they'll be like, "Dad, tell me a story," and I just have these like, they would call them legendary stories because I don't ever have a plan with the story. I start writing it as I go, and I'm just telling them. But there's all these characters and voices, and so it's
Oh,
fun. It's
so
sort of me
fantastic.
living out my voiceover acting career in private because I don't know that it'll happen. But
That's
another one,
great.
Ender's Game is a really big one for
Mm,
me too. It's one of my favorites that I've made all the kids read. And then there's a series he didn't finish it yet, but it's by a guy named Cliff Graham called The Lion of War. Day of War series. It's about King
okay.
David and his mighty men. It sort of
Okay.
reads like Braveheart meets 300 meets King David, like it's
Fantastic. I've
very
never heard of
gory
this.
and it's very war-y and it's awesome, but it's so well written.
Okay.
And he wrote 3 books of the series out of the 5 he was supposed to write. So I'm not sure if he'll ever finish that, but they're
Okay.
amazing. So I've made all the boys read. He actually sent signed copies of the set to each of the
Oh,
boys, and
I love
so
that.
those are the big ones. On the horizon, Theodore Rex by Edmund Morris. It's
Oh, about
I really
Teddy
just think
Roosevelt.
Teddy Roosevelt is just such a fascinating character to me, and I love history, and so I'm always reading some sort of biography.
I love
Um,
this.
so yeah, it's just I love it.
That
So
is fantastic. That's the second presidential reference you have made during this conversation. So you're into presidents. I am as well.
what was my first presidential reference?
You talked about, well, not presidential, founding fathers.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Some of those
That's
ended
like,
up.
hey, who is the
Um,
other? Yeah, for
but
sure.
listen, if you like Teddy Roosevelt books, I have a rec for you. It's called The River of Doubt. Have you read this?
Okay,
I
no,
think it's Candace Millard. We'll put it in the show notes. But that is this,
okay.
it's a scene in Teddy's life, if I can call him Teddy, where he went down the Amazon
Everyone else
with his
does.
son. Totally. Why not? But it's a great book. If you love history and you love presidents, River of Doubt, highly recommend when you're done with what's it called? Teddy Rex?
Theodore
Theodore
Rex.
Rex, King
But I
David.
did just hear the origin story of the teddy bear while
Oh,
reading it. You're like,
okay.
oh my gosh, like I knew the teddy bear was named after him, but I didn't know the legend behind it,
Are you
you
going
know?
to
And
tell us?
so no, you have to go read it.
Okay. Got it. Okay.
You
Well
can
done.
find it. Actually, it was funny. My son Liam just did a book report on him, which is what got me kind of into it.
Ah,
And so he sort of told me the short version of it.
okay.
Basically, he was on a hunting trip and refused to kill a bear, and so
Okay.
the it just sort of the legend continued, and they started
From
making
there.
little. They named it after him, and
How
it's
about
it's pretty
that?
cool.
I've
Yeah,
never heard that story. He does
yeah,
hunt in the Amazon in that book. So just no, not all
yes.
bears got past Theodore Rex.
Yeah. No. It's a pretty funny story for the bear thing. Anyway,
I love it.
it's
Everyone
fun.
needs to go
Yeah.
look it up for sure.
Yeah.
Stephen Miller, thank you for joining me today and for having such a fun
Yeah.
conversation. Thanks for writing a great book and thanks for putting great stuff out into the world. I
Thank
love what
you.
you're doing.
Thank you so much, Kim. Appreciate you so much. And I can't wait for the next time and we'll have you on our podcast.
Okay, fantastic. Sounds good. Thanks so
All
much for
righty.
being here.
See ya.